Welcome back to another deep dive. Have you ever looked at one of those really long chemical names and just wondered, is that random? Or is there like a secret code?
It definitely looks like a secret code sometimes.
Right. So today we're going to try and crack it. We're diving into organic chemistry, which, there are millions of known compounds. Millions. How do chemists even begin to keep track?
It seems impossible, doesn't it? But the amazing thing, and this is what our source, Organic Chemistry for Dummies second, really points out, is that organic chemistry has this incredibly systematic way of naming things. It's not like, say, biology where names can sometimes feel a bit arbitrary.
Ah, okay, so there's a logic to it.
A very precise logic. And our mission today is really to give you a shortcut to understanding that logic, that language of molecular names, sort of cut through the complexity.
And that systematic approach, well, that's why this really matters, doesn't it? Imagine trying to memorize a totally random name for every single molecule.
You couldn't. It'd be impossible.
Exactly. But if you get the rules, you can actually figure out the structure from the name or name a molecule you've maybe never even seen before.
Yeah, the core idea, and the source hammers this home, is that every unique molecule must have a unique name. No confusion allowed. It's like a universal ID.
A chemical fingerprint in the name itself. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Alkanes. What fundamentally are we talking about here?
Okay, alkanes. The absolute core definition is they contain only carbon-carbon single bonds. Just single bonds between carbons.
No doubles, no triples. Got it.
Exactly. And because of that, we call them saturated hydrocarbons. Saturated just means they're holding the maximum possible number of hydrogen atoms. Every spot is filled, basically.
Full up with hydrogens. Makes sense.
And that leads to a neat general formula. CnH2n plus 2, and it's just the number of carbons.
Okay. So if I tell you an alkane has, say, 8 carbons.
Then you immediately know it's C8H, 2 times 8 plus 2, H18, CH18. It follows directly from that saturated single-bonded structure.
That's actually really useful. Okay, so we know what they are. How do we start naming the simple ones, the straight chain ones?
Right, the straight chains are the building blocks. And the first rule, super basic, is all alkane names end with the suffix -ane.
Alane. Okay, so that's the flag saying I'm an alkane.
Precisely. Then you've got the prefix, the start of the name. And for the first 4 carbons, it's a bit quirky.
Quirky how?
They come from historical roots, not the Greek numbers yet. There's that classic mnemonic, Mary eats peanut butter.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one. Mary. Methane.
Methane, 1 carbon. Eats.
Ethane, 2 carbons. Propane, 3.
Butter.
Butane, 4 carbons. CH4, then the CH3, CH3, and so on. Those are the absolute fundamentals.
Yep, those first 4. Then, once you get to 5 carbons or more, it becomes, well, more logical. You use Greek number prefixes.
Like pentagon, hexagon.
Exactly. Penta for 5, so pentane. Hexa for 6, hexane.
Heptane for 7, octane 8, nonane 9, decane 10.
And it keeps going systematically. Undecane for 11, dodecane for 12.
Okay, so combine those Greek prefixes with litoene, and you've got the straight chains covered.
That's the foundation. You really need these straight chain names down before things get, well, more interesting.
More interesting. Okay, I sense a but coming. We've got the straight lines, but life isn't always straight, is it?
No, definitely not in chemistry. Alkenes don't have to be just a line. They can have branches coming off the main chain.
Branches, okay. And this brings in that term, isomers.
Isomers, exactly. That's some proper organic speak, as the source puts it.
So what does it mean, really?
Isomers are molecules that have the exact same molecular formula, same number of carbons, same number of hydrogens, but...
They're put together differently?
Exactly. The atoms are connected in a different pattern, making them distinct chemical structures. Different molecules potentially with different properties.
Right, and this isn't just a naming thing, it's fundamental. Same ingredients, different recipe, different outcome. Like you said, maybe fuel versus plastic.
Precisely. The naming system has to be able to tell these apart clearly.
Okay, so a good example from the source is C4H10. You hear that, you might just think butane.
Right, the straight chain butane we just named. But there's another way to connect 4 carbons and 10 hydrogens.
Which is shown in figure 711. It's branched.
Yep, that's isobutane, same formula, C4H10, but a different structure. So the big question is, how do we name these different structures systematically so everyone knows exactly which one we mean?
And this is where the step-by-step process comes in. 6 steps, right? Let's start with step 1. Find the parent chain.
The parent chain. And yeah, the source calls this potentially the trickiest step.
Why tricky?
Because our eyes often want to just go left or right across the page. But the longest continuous chain of carbons might actually, bend or snake around the molecule.
Ah, so you got to trace all the possible paths. That's where they say organic professors like to hide the parent chain by making it curve.
They do. It tests if you're really looking for the longest chain, not just the most obvious one. Like in figure 7.2, the longest chain snakes around and it's 7 carbons long.
Even if a horizontal path looks simply, but is shorter. Okay, so 7 carbons means the parent name is heptane.
Exactly, you've found the base game.
Okay, parent chain identified, heptane. Step 2, numbering it. There are always 2 ways to start, right? One end or the other.
Yep, at least 2 ways for any chain that isn't perfectly symmetrical. And you need a rule. The rule is start numbering from the end that gets you to the first substituent the fastest.
Substituent. That's the organic speak for a branch.
Pretty much. Any fragment or group coming off that main parent chain.
So using the example in figure 7.3, if you number starting, say, top down.
That first branch, the first substituent, is on carbon number 3.
But if you started numbering from the bottom up?
Then that first substituent wouldn't appear until carbon number 4.
Ah, so 3 is lower than 4. You must start from the top down in that case.
Correct. Lowest number for the first point of difference. That's the key. Consistency.
Got it. Parent chain found, heptane numbered correctly. Step 3 is figuring out what those branches, those substituents, actually are and naming them.
Right. And the naming is, again, systematic. It's very similar to the parent chains. But instead of ending in A-ane, they end in E.
EL means branch. Okay.
So a 1-carbon branch isn't methane, it's
methyl.
Methyl group. A 2-carbon branch is ethyl, 3 is propyl, 4 is butyl, and so on.
Makes sense. And the source mentions some common ones we kind of just need to know, like memorize.
Absolutely, because they show up constantly. There's the isopropyl group, the 3-carbon one that's branched itself, looks like a Y shape or, snake stump.
Okay, isopropyl.
Then there's tert-butyl, often written T-butyl, and sec-butyl. Figure 7 and 5 shows these clearly. For our running example from figure 7 of 4, we'd see a methyl group at carbon 3.
The 1-carbon branch.
And an isopropyl group, that Y-shaped one, at carbon 4.
Okay, so we have parent heptane, numbering top down, substituents methyl at 3, isopropyl at 4. Now step 4 is putting it all into one name, ordering them.
Yes, putting it all together. The rule is you list the substituents alphabetically before the parent name.
Alphabetically. Okay, so IF for isopropyl comes before methyl.
Right. And you use numbers to show where each one is attached. You use hyphens to separate numbers from names.
Hyphens, okay. And no space between the last substituent and the parent name.
Correct. So putting our example together, alphabetical order means isopropyl first. It's at position 4. So 4 isopropyl, then methyl at position 3. So 3 methyl. Put it all together.
4 isopropyl methyl heptane. Wow, okay.
See? It tells the whole story. Heptane main chain, isopropyl group on carbon 4, methyl group on carbon 3.
But wait, you mentioned those common names, tert-butyl and sec-butyl. How do they fit into alphabetizing? Is tert-butyl under T?
Good question. This is one of those little quirks, the stick in the spokes the source mentions. For alphabetizing, you actually ignore the tert out on sec prefixes.
Ignore them. So tert-butyl is alphabetized under...
Under B, exactly. But confusingly, isopropyl IS alphabetized under I.
Okay, that is a quirk. Why?
It's sort of a mix of systematic rules and historical usage that's stuck. It shows how scientific language evolves, It cries for logic, but sometimes history gets baked in. It's not just arbitrary rules. It's about clarity and convention that developed over time.
Fascinating. Okay, quirk noted. What about step 5? What if you have, 2 methyl groups? Or 3?
Right. Multiple identical substituents. You don't write methyl. You use prefixes. Dia for 2, tri for 3, tetra for 4, and so on. There's a table in the source, table 7.2.
So 2 methyl groups would be dimethyl.
Exactly. And this is crucial. You must give a location number for each one, even if they're on the same carbon.
So if you had 2 methyls on carbon 2, you'd write 2 Conley, 2 dimethyl.
Precisely. Commas separate the numbers, like 2, 3 dimethyl if they were on carbons 2 and 3.
And how do these prefixes affect alphabetizing? Does dimethyl come under D?
Nope. Another rule. These multiplying prefixes, D, tri, and tetra, are also ignored for alphabetizing.
Also ignored. So dimethyl is still alphabetized under J.
Still under MPU and for methyl.
Yep.
Figure 7.6 has some good examples showing this.
The system is intricate, but wow, it covers a lot. Okay, one last step, step 6. What if the branch itself is complicated? Like a branch that has its own branches and doesn't have a simple common name like isopropyl, like in figure 7.7.
Complex substituents. This is where it gets, even more layered. You basically treat that complex branch as its own little naming problem.
Sub-problem.
Kind of, yeah. You name it like it was an alkane, finding its longest chain within the branch, but you still end its name with "-il" because it's a branch off the main parent chain.
Okay, so it's like nomenclature inception.
Huh, something like that. And here's the absolute key, main catch, as the source puts it. When you number the little chain inside the complex substituent, the carbon atom that actually attaches the whole branch to the main parent chain must be carbon number 1 of that branch.
Ah, okay. The attachment point is always carbon 1 for the branch's own numbering. Figure 7 to 8 shows that clearly the right way versus the wrong way to number it internally.
Exactly. Yeah. So following that rule, you might end up with a complex substituent named something like 1,4,3-dimethylpropyl.
Meaning a 3-carbon propyl branch, which itself has methyl groups on its own, carbons 1 and 2.
Perfect. And when you put that complex name into the full molecule's name, you enclose the entire complex substituent name in parentheses.
Parentheses. Okay, so the example in figure 7, the 7 ends up being 5,1, pp2 dimethylpropyl, nonen.
Exactly. The main chain is nonen, 9 carbons. At carbon 5, there's a complex branch. What branch? The stuff in the parentheses. A 12,4,3-dimethylpropyl group.
Wow, okay. From straight chains to, well, branches on branches named systematically, it really is elegant in a way. Every part of the name tells you precisely where everything is.
It's incredibly powerful. It lets chemists anywhere in the world look at a name and draw the exact same structure, or look at a structure and arrive at the same name. No ambiguity.
But it sounds like practice is key.
Oh, absolutely essential. The source really emphasizes that. Writing the rules is one thing, but actually naming molecule after molecule, that's where it clicks. That's where you get those aha moments.
Makes total sense. You learn the steps, then you just have to drill them.
Yeah.
You know, thinking about this whole system, it's so structured, so rule-based, even with its quirks. It creates this universal language for chemists. What does that say about, like, the human need to create order out of complexity?
That's a really interesting thought. I mean, you see it everywhere, don't you? Legal systems, musical notation, computer code. We seem to have this fundamental drive to build systems to create shared rules and understanding, especially when dealing with something incredibly vast and complex like the world of molecules.
A way to map the chaos, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. It's a testament to wanting to make sense of it all together.
That's a great way to think about it. Well, thank you for guiding us through that intricate world of alkane nomenclature. Hopefully everyone listening feels a bit more confident tackling those long chemical names now.
Hope so. It's logical once you get the hang of it.
Thanks again for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.